Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Trauma Translator. I'm Lauren Friedman, your host, and today on this episode, I'm actually going to be doing a solo episode to explain the why behind the Why Go project and the Trauma Translator. And you might notice that I have a little bit of Palo Santo with me, and this is one of my How Are You Healing habits that I use pretty regularly, that actually Celeste reminded me in last March of 2025, Celeste Bonin, who I had on the second episode of the Trauma Translator, former WWE athlete and champion. And she actually reminded me that this is a really good nervous system reset. And it wasn't even intentionally as a reminder, but it just happened so much that I ended up using it in a real way. So if you ever are in a place where you can light some Palo Santo, I'm not saying do it in an office, but if you're at home or anywhere else, it's a really good reset, and it's a good way to take a deep breath and get your nervous system to a better place. It's not a panacea, but it's one of the How Are You Healing habits that I use every day. So one of the reasons that I'm here today is because I have a story to share. I'm not here to actually, I just realized that we're not streaming across Instagram. And that was one of the things I wanted to do. So that's why I just stumbled. But I'm not here to hear myself talk. That's not why I'm here. I'm actually here so that people can find a way to get through the hardest problems, because no one teaches us how to human. And how can we solve for or change anything that we don't understand? And the reason the Why Go project exists, and the reason that I'm doing this, is because I've had a lifetime of experiences that most people haven't. And I ended up, I'm so happy to hear that you like that, Natasha. I ended up in a position that is really dangerous. And as a society, we're in a place right now that things are a little bit out of control. Like, I'm not trying to get political, but I saw on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night that Lindsey Graham was on Fox News saying to the Ayatollahs of Iran, if you keep killing your people, Donald Trump's gonna kill you. And I'm like, are you Eminem? What's going on here? Well, how is our society in a place where government officials are threatening to kill people on public TV, but if I say the word suicide in the form of education, I get disconnected from YouTube and TikTok and all the other platforms. So as a society, we have a lot of things that we don't fully understand, and we've been trying to solve for generations. And because we never fully understood life through the lens of trauma, all of these things keep happening, and people keep ending up in the same situations of dysfunction. And I had to learn the really hard way why psychotherapy doesn't work, and why, working so hard and doing everything myself really wasn't the answer. So in June of 23, when I lost my job for the 6th time with my whole team and company, I never went on LinkedIn and said, I lost my job, I need a new job, because I didn't know what I was gonna do. But I was interviewing internally and externally, and I started having the same somatic responses that I started to learn in 2022 and 2023 were things I shouldn't be doing. And when I learned how to listen to my body, it actually helped me inform all the rest of my decisions. So I knew at that time, in June of 23, that I shouldn't be in the advertising industry anymore. I mean, there's so many ways that the advertising and technology industry anymore. There's so many ways that the universe has been trying to tell me that this wasn't healthy for me, and my body was trying to tell me it wasn't healthy for me, but I didn't know how to listen to it, because as a society, no one's ever been taught how to human. No one has ever been taught how to regulate our nervous systems, because really we've only understood trauma since 1980, and I was born in 1983. And I've been having somatic responses to trauma since under the age of 2, and both of my parents were therapists, and I was in therapy since I was 5 years old. And nobody understood the mind-body connection. And I had to learn through the really hardest ways in life, losing my entire family, losing my job 6 times, losing over 100 pounds multiple times from when I was doing diet and exercise to the extreme, having really extreme dysfunction in my marriage, what the real cost of unprocessed complex trauma is. And when we think about it at a macro level, what's happening in our society, what's happening around the world, it's really something that it's not just a me problem. This is an everybody problem. So that's why I'm here. I'm here not to hear myself talk. I actually, if I could live life under a rock, I would. It would really be at a beach. But if you met me in any time before June of 23, you would have known that I didn't want to lose my job. I tried so hard not to lose my job that I ended up ruining my life. And I've learned through all of these different experiences how to actually get your nervous system to a baseline where you can function. You could actually heal illness. You could have actually illness reversal. You can have all of these different experiences that your nervous system was used to and now doesn't have to actually do any longer. So what I'm here to do is showcase different types of entrepreneurs, people, all types of across disciplinary area of expertise through the lens of trauma, so that people have the ability to hear different stories and different ways that other people have overcome, but also learn how to get the resources, how to change your life for good. Because I used to think that I had a weight problem. Everybody else in my family had mental health issues. I've never been on a psychiatric drug. I would take it if I needed it. All of this actually affected my thyroid and my hormones, which is a big problem for women especially, but also men. And these are things that the medical community really doesn't understand. And that is also something I had to learn the hard way. So I really want everyone to understand what happens through the lens of trauma and the human experience through the lens of trauma. Because when we understand things through the lens of trauma, we can then fix it. But if we don't understand it through the lens of trauma, we're going to keep repeating those same cycles over and over and just spot treating those dysfunctional areas of our lives instead of looking at things holistically. So for the past 20 years, I spent my time in advertising and technology, and I was selling emerging technology, and I loved it. I was addicted to it. I was obsessed with it. Like, if you met me at a bar, I don't drink anymore, but if you met me at a bar at any time before the last few years, I would be talking to you about every single thing in the technology industry because I was so obsessed with the technology I sold. I thought it was so cool. We were able to see actual conversions across different online and offline channels. And I spent my whole career trying to prove out the efficacy of the actual media that we were producing on behalf of our agencies and brands and platforms. And nobody understood why mobile wasn't working. This is really why I ended up in measurement. And this is ultimately why I'm so passionate about nervous system regulation, because the way I look at healing and nervous system regulation is the same way that I look at advertising and technology. And it's part of the inspiration for the Why Go project, because as I was going through my own healing journey, I was able to really understand how the brain works and building new neural pathways through the lens of technology, because that's my background. And when I had lost and gained over 100 pounds initially in 2013, I was able to use that to explain data fidelity and quality to varying levels of audiences and understanding in a palatable format. And that's what I'm doing now with trauma, because everybody needs to learn how to find healing. If you don't think you need healing, you do, because everybody, whether we recognize it or not, is in some level of a dysfunctional state unless they're working actively to regulate their nervous system. And even when you're doing that, you still might be, right? There's nothing that is a hard and fast rule in life. You can't count on anything. But when you learn how to regulate your nervous system, the whole world opens up. I have stress tested this to the max. I've lost my entire family. My ex-in-laws were stealing from me in the family business for the last 20 years. And then they tried to come after me legally. So when you think about complex trauma and healing, the reason that I'm doing this is when I spent a majority of my career in emerging technology, and I started in mobile, and mobile ended up actually taking over the world, right? And with the advent of the smartphone, the whole world changed. You know, Facebook, that used to just be on a computer, became something that was ubiquitous. I remember being in the New York Times elevator and two adults, right? Because I was like in my 20s and these people were in their like 30s or 40s, were talking about Facebook. And I was on Facebook since I was a senior in college in October of 2004. And I remember thinking like, oh, this changes things. So with the advent of the smartphone, a lot of brands and advertisers wanted to be where the consumers are, right? And we had all these different campaigns that we were trying to prove out the efficacy of. And we worked for months and months and months on all these really custom interstitials and really engaging creatives and all these different ways to engage with the consumer. And then when we would get the results back, you know, the performance results, they would look abysmal at best. And I would have to then package it to the end client and be like, oh yeah, these are the things that are happening in your campaign. And everyone would be like, why isn't this performing? Like, we don't get it. Why is it having the click-through rate was what people were looking at the time. There wasn't even like a way to get to a conversion at the time. There was, you know, proxies, but there wasn't a way to get to that end conversion. So when I had the opportunity to join a company called Media Labs that had been acquired by WPP, they had a pixel, a JavaScript pixel, which is very important, that allowed you to traverse multiple mobile in-app and mobile web, because they don't speak to each other. So that was something that allowed you to solve for those disparate environments. And when you think about healing and nervous system regulation, the way I look at healing is at a holistic level. You can't just be looking at one source of truth. You can't just be looking at one part of your life. You have to look at things holistically. So the reason I'm doing this on LinkedIn is because LinkedIn needs to learn how to heal. Everybody on LinkedIn is either promoting themselves, which is great, promoting a company, or trying to get a new job. And when I first went to market, I didn't share what I was doing because I thought that when I finally did, I would get a lot of support. But I should have shared it, because that's the first, when people are like, oh, I lost my job, you get a lot of support. And it's just like when someone dies, people are really, really supportive in the beginning, but then after a while, they forget about you. And the problem with that is that now I'm in a position where I've had a 20-year prolific career. My ex-in-laws are stealing from me in the family business. I have it on a recording from their accountant. They still tried to come after me legally. So yesterday would have been my 20-year date anniversary with my now ex-husband. And instead I spent the day getting an immunity and indemnification document notarized. Because why are these people coming after me? They say they have no obligation towards me. And my industry has not taken any accountability for what has gone on. Everyone keeps losing their jobs over and over and over again. And I've stress tested this to the max. And I know for a fact that nervous system regulation is the panacea for all problems in society, whether it's cancers, autoimmune diseases, ADDs, OCDs, all of the autism. I mean, all of the things that humans are suffering with, either overtly or silently, are ways that you can actually solve by healing your nervous system. So this is something that I personally believe in. I know that it works. And, I've spent the last few years with holidays by myself. I lost my whole family. My ex's family wasn't a family to me. They were stealing from me. They were attacking me for years before I even found out that they were stealing from me. And my body had been trying to show me the whole time. And the reason I'm sharing this isn't to defame or defraud, or not defraud, but to defame. It's not to defame or to embarrass people, but it's to share real experiences of what happens when generations of unprocessed complex trauma compound on top of each other. And when nobody finds any healing, this is what happens. And, I've been through these experiences that have been so transformative and so meaningful in my life that I know that this is the way forward. So today, I just want to share a little bit of my background behind Why Go. Why Go is from a Pearl Jam song, Maybe Someday Another Child Won't Feel As Alone. And that was my original goal. When I first thought of the Pediatric Complex Trauma Foundation and nonprofit, my inspiration was for just that. I wasn't thinking about doing anything, as a whole business. I wanted to keep my job in tech and start my nonprofit on the side. And then when I lost my job and I realized that my body was telling me that I should not be going back to the industry and I needed to do something with this, really, it's not just compelling, it's a consequential story. When people don't take responsibility or accountability and they just go on with their lives and they act like you don't exist and no one cares about your needs, and you don't even realize it because you're just trying to solve every problem because your nervous system is so used to these engagements, they don't seem abnormal to you. These are the things that happen to people. And the reason I'm doing this on LinkedIn too is so that people understand, what happens when all of these things happen and this person can't provide for themselves. Like I'm at this point right now where I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know. I just spent my last money actually producing this show from my savings account. And I have to go now into my 401k, and I was a top producer. I'm told I should be in leadership by multiple people. And then as soon as there's a problem in the business, they let go of my new business team. And then I'm told, oh, you have too many short stints, or you make too much money. And first I was told that I didn't have the right look, or I wasn't ready. And then as soon as I lost weight, my career skyrocketed. And the thing is that I think we lost the plot here as a society. What are we doing in business and in personal life? Like, why are we here? The whole point of working is to make money, right? It's to help people provide for themselves so they can have a better life for themselves, their families, their children, what have you. And when you keep laying people off over and over and then telling them that it's their fault and they have too many short stints or they make too much money or this, and this, it's really damaging to a person. And I'm really resilient. I've been saving myself my whole life. And one of my problems was that I was so focused on saving myself, I thought that I had to save everybody around me. And I didn't even realize that my now ex-husband, who's a kind man, but he had no intention of ever getting a new job. And he had no intention of ever making more money. And that all fell on me. But what happens when you lose your job 6 times and you lose your whole family and then the world implodes? And these are real problems that real people are facing. So redefining the human experience through the lens of trauma really is something that is a soul-driven mission for me, because this is how we find healing in society. Everybody has something from which to heal. It's epigenetic. It lives in our genes and it becomes pronounced through environmental factors. And everyone who's looking for a new job or just wants to keep their job or wants to have better relationships with themselves or others needs to find nervous system regulation, because when you don't, you end up getting stuck in those same cycles of dysfunction. And I'm going to share just a little journey with you today. This is something I call Only Music Can Save Us. It's mental health and trauma education through music. My dad was really instrumental in me understanding about music at a young age and teaching me through music. That's how we connected. That's how he regulated himself. And that's actually how we ended up co-regulating. And I have a lot of comedy routines around these things. But when you think about healing and nervous system attachment wounds and how you end up in these cycles of dysfunction and you don't know how to change them, and why your life is always on fire, or why you're always sick, like chronic illness, chronic pain, weight gain, all these things all have to do with nervous system regulation. And when you can regulate your nervous system, you can change your entire life. I've been able to find peace in the unknown. And truly, this is my worst nightmare, like living on this planet Earth, like not having any family, having my ex-in-laws attack me, not my ex-husband now nobody has any obligation towards me. My industry doesn't care. My ex-husband's family doesn't care. I lost my whole family. I didn't even have any protection in my family. So yesterday was the first day that I got any protection on this planet. It took me 20 years for this man to send an email on my behalf that he actually supported me and protected me. 20 years. And I stayed in this relationship for that long because I thought it was safer than being by myself. And everyone for all these years were like, why isn't Lauren getting divorced? Why doesn't she just leave? But the definition of complex trauma is begging someone to treat you better when you can just leave. And I didn't know that I could just leave. So I've now spent 40 years plus on this planet in chronic pain, having weight issues, begging people to treat me better. Nobody cares, work harder. I kept going harder and harder and harder in my industry. And now I actually figured out I don't have to do that anymore. I found a way to actually find a flow in life and actually find a way to work hard, but also while I'm getting my things done, but also in a way that's not killing me. Because as a society, we were taught to go, go, go. And some of my guests, even today, we're going to be talking about that in terms of technology and the pressures of society and the human body, right? We were not meant to go at this hyper speed. This is why everyone's getting sick. And when you don't have the ability to regulate your nervous system is still attracted to those types of dysfunctional relationships. I've now lost every single significant relationship in my life, but I found a level of peace that I never knew I could have in my mind and body. And the mind body is one. What you think actually affects what's going on in your body. I used to think that because I ate really healthy and I starved myself and I worked out and I worked really hard that I was healthy, but I wasn't at all. I wasn't healthy even a little bit. I was actually really unwell and I didn't know it. And it took me until I was having flashbacks and wetting the bed and brain fog. My brain was not working. And I still secured a job at Oracle. And when I did that, I asked my ex-husband to get a contract with his father to protect us in the same way that I was getting a contract with my job, right? Like, what's the plan? Because I knew I had to get divorced, but I wanted some protection. And what is the true definition and the true cost of avoidance? This is the true cost of avoidance. My family couldn't ever communicate to me what the things that I needed to know in my family. So then I ended up, after my mom's sudden death, and actually tomorrow is 7 years of her death anniversary, which used to be a big, big day that I used to focus on. And it was something that actually my friend Brian Kilmer, who I worked with like over a decade ago, he's been a mentor over the years. He had texted me 7 years ago after my mom had died. And he was like, hey, listen, take the time, feel your feelings. Don't just plow through this. And he and I both knew I wasn't going to do that. I didn't have the ability to do that. I didn't even know how to do that. Even though I was in therapy since I was 5, no one ever taught me to process my emotions. No one ever taught me to regulate my nervous system, because psychotherapy is stuck in logic, and you can't logic your way into healing. You have to do it somatically, and you have to integrate it. You can't just talk about it. There's a lot of people out here that are talking about healing, and they say all the right things, but when you look at their behavior, they're not actually integrated. They could say these things, but I don't have to say I'm doing the work, because what my actions speak for that. So I've now lost every significant relationship in my life. I've lost my dad to suicide. My mom dropped dead from complex trauma. My sibling and I are not allowed to speak legally because of avoidance. And now my marriage, because people can't speak to each other, and I got caught as collateral. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is I don't ever want to be collateral in another human's war against themselves. And I don't want anyone else to either, because it's really bad for us. And as a society, we could get better. We don't have to stay this sick. We don't have to hurt people. We don't have to have these wars. We don't have to have Lindsey Graham on TV saying, President Trump's, I'm gonna kill you. Like, what's going on? Like, I love him. I think he's wonderful, but he was under trial for the FCC and he didn't even try to kill anybody. So what's happening in our society? We all need to reset our nervous systems. And the Trauma Translator is here to help. I'm going to be providing ways that you understand that could be understandable and really clearly understood and actioned upon, as well as different guests that have found healing and ways to look at life through a different perspective, because I see things differently than most people. My story is different than a lot of people. And I have a unique POV that allows people to really understand their lives through a different lens. So I'm really excited to continue this. I'm excited to have guests on. Please join us at 1 p.m. And I just think that this is something that everybody needs to learn and everybody needs to heal. And I've stress tested this to the max. I've had zero family, zero support. I've had to do everything on my own. And when you do that over a lifetime, it kills you unless you know how to regulate your nervous system. So this is my story that I'm going to end with for today. And it's a little bit what's happening in the news. And what's his name? Maduro kind of took my joke away from me, because when I was 5 years old, my dad tried to commit suicide, and he dropped me off at kindergarten, and then he never came back again. And I remember being in the police station with my sibling, who was only 16 months old at the time. My mom was in a room talking to the police, and she was wobbling around. And I remember thinking, this is my child. I have to be responsible for her. And I was only 5, and she was only 16 months old. And around that same time, my mom she had limited family. She didn't even, I know now in retrospect, she had an estranged half-brother, and she was not close with her mom. And she didn't even mention it to her family. And the reason why these things happen, right, is my dad grew up in the projects in East New York on welfare. He comes from so much mental health dysfunction, and we could go into that another time, but he came from extreme dysfunction. My mom came from extreme dysfunction. Her mom escaped the Holocaust and then came here, and within 5 years of escaping the Holocaust, had my mom, and then ended up in an abusive relationship and had to get divorced in the 50s and beat the out of my mom. So when you think about complex trauma and at an epigenetic level, meaning it lives in your genes, it's something that every single person in society has, because we've all, especially in a melting pot like the United States, whether or not anyone wants to admit it, we are all non-natives. We are all people that came here from different countries. We're all immigrants here. This is a melting pot, and we all have all types of complex trauma that live in our genes, and they become pronounced through really stressful lifestyles. And trauma is just another word for stress that overwhelms your ability to cope. And that looks different for everybody. And that's why trauma responses look different for everybody. So that's why the medical community has never understood trauma. And that's why, psychotherapists, they're not trained on this. And that's why social workers aren't trained. That's why no one's ever understood this. That's why I slipped right under the cracks, because I've been performing at such a high level since I was an infant, since I was born. And when you think about complex trauma, my mom never knew how to ask for help because no one ever helped her. They worked against her, and that's what she was used to. So when my dad tried to commit suicide when I was 5, and we couldn't find him, she ended up asking his brother, who was a religious Jew in Brooklyn, to come into New Jersey. This was 1988, and I had gone to a Jewish preschool where you had to be kosher there, but we weren't kosher at home. So this is an important part of the story. So these people came, we weren't super close with them, but they were my aunt and uncle, and they had to buy kosher food in order to stay with us. Fine. And they did. And they were making me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for kindergarten, because I was only 5. And they bought this raspberry jelly, and it was the only kosher jelly, I guess, that was around in the late 80s in central New Jersey, right? It wasn't a super religious Jewish area, so they couldn't find what they needed. So they bought this kosher jelly, and it had a lot of seeds in it. And the thing is that I didn't ask for a lot of things. I asked for basically nothing. My requests were so minimal. They're so minimal to this day. And when I asked for something, right, because normally when there's a major crisis, families huddle together and they make sure the children are okay. But because my mom never knew how to ask for help, and she never had any help in her life, she overextended herself, and she was so grateful that people were there to quote unquote help her that she didn't want to do anything to make them feel uncomfortable. So I said to her, I was like, hey mom, I have this peanut butter and jelly that has seeds in it, this raspberry jelly. It has seeds in it, and can I just have a different jelly? I don't like the seeds. I was 5. And she told me that because they were kosher and they were helping us, that their needs mattered more, and that I couldn't have that. And that was something that stuck in my nervous system for the rest of my life. Now, I had been told in many different ways, both implicitly and explicitly, or implicitly and explicitly, that my needs didn't matter. But in this specific instance, this is something that I didn't even consider for many, many years until I started trauma therapy in March of 2022. I realized, because I was having a protein bar that was raspberry flavored, and I love raspberries, but I hated raspberry flavored things. And I don't know what, but something clicked, and I brought this to my therapist, and I was like, I had an aha moment, a connection, because connection changes everything. And everybody has these things that live inside them that they don't realize unless they get the right help. And so I ended up having this jelly and having this aversion to raspberry flavored things. And I realized it was because of the jelly in 1988 that actually I didn't like, and that was told me that my needs didn't matter. So I have this raspberry jelly as a reminder of how I ended up in this position, because I said to my mom at the time, I was 5 years old, but I knew that what she was saying was wrong. I was like, great, I'm not kosher. And I know that because I went to a preschool that kept kosher in school, and at home we weren't. So why can't I have that? And so that sets your nervous system up. That simple little conversation that wasn't meant to be harmful, right? But that sets your nervous system up for a lifetime of not mattering, and your needs don't matter. And around that same time, the song "Don't Worry, Be Happy," do 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 do. Anyway, I'm not trying to culturally appropriate whatever, and I don't have a great voice, but I am going to sing to you anyway. That song was really popular. So my mom, all the adults around me were like, "Don't worry, be happy." And the thing is that when you grow up being told, "Don't worry, be happy," and your needs don't matter, this is what happens. And I spent my entire life thinking my needs didn't matter. Everyone's needs mattered more. I had to work for love. I had to prove myself over and over and over again. And that's why I call it survival mode as my superpower, and survival mode as a superpower, because all of these things made me hyper successful and prolific. And I've had a wonderful life, right? Until I didn't, until my body literally forced me to stop. And that's the thing about high functioning complex trauma and high performance. Every single person who's successful suffers in these same ways, whether they realize it or not. I didn't know I was in pain. I had a 39-year stomachache, and I didn't know I was in pain because I never was taught to be in my body. I didn't even know how to slow down. I've been able to solve 40 plus years of chronic pain and weight issues. I haven't even had to get Botox in my jaw since August 27th. And the last time I had a migraine, a real migraine, was September 19th, right the weekend after I got divorced. And I've been getting migraines since I was 16 years old. I was told that it was genetic, but the thing is that it's not. It doesn't have to be. The cancers of the world, the ADDs, the autisms, all of this doesn't have to be genetic. You can actually reverse those illnesses. You can actually biohack your life. So that's what we're here to do. I want to talk about all the ways that things live inside your body and how to get them out of them so you can have a better life for yourself and others. Because if you can't show up for yourself, you can't show up for others. I just recently, and this is the saddest thing for me to say, but I recently ended a 40-year friendship. It would be 40 years this upcoming June, because this person can't even text me back. And I understand they're going through their own stuff, but over the course of many months, when I've lost my family, my job, my divorce, all these things are happening, you can't send me one text once in a while to make sure that I'm still alive. That's not a friendship. And this isn't recent. These are, over time. And I had to make these really hard decisions to take myself and extract myself out of these really toxic situations for me. But now guess what? I feel a level of peace that I never felt. And I know that better things are coming because they have to. We can't live in this type of in this type of disarray forever and think that it's just going to stay that way, because it's not. But it will if you don't regulate your nervous system. So these are just some things that I'm going to share, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to do that, because I know that this is my mission on this planet. I've known since I was a little girl that I had a story to share to help others. I didn't know how crazy it was going to get. I mean, I really didn't. I just wanted to have a normal life. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have a house, the white picket fence. All I ever wanted was family. And I was working so hard to run away from my family that I ran into a family that was way more dysfunctional, because at least my family was trying to get help. My family knew they knew they were effed up, right? So they went to therapy. My parents were therapists. They tried their hardest, but the society and the knowledge base that we had then wasn't able to get down to a somatic level. And when you could get to a somatic level, you could actually stop suicide. We know that there's a men's health crisis. If 50% of the crisis or more, if 50% of society or more is in crisis, what kind of society do we have? And I think it's very clear now at a macro level that there's a lot of things that are unprocessed. Like the reason that, and again, I'm not trying to be political, but it's what's current news. And the reason that Donald Trump is the way he is from unprocessed complex trauma. Like Susie Weil literally said, he's an alcoholic who doesn't drink. And that is the definition of complex trauma, because addiction, self-abandonment, all of these things, his behavior is literally what it looks like when you don't process complex trauma, because you don't care about other people's feelings. You put yourself first. You make rash decisions based on your own needs, and you don't even look at what's going on because you don't have the ability to. So when you have the ability to connect with yourself deeper, you could really understand, how am I going to live myself? How am I going to live my life in alignment? How am I going to do what's integritous to me? How am I going to help others find ways to have healing on their own? And that's what I'm really focused on, because I know that this is a panacea. And I would have taken my own life already if I didn't find nervous system healing. You know, I thought I was understood that in 2021, but over the last few years, when I've been begging people to support me, like just throw a like on something, because we all know how algorithms work, right? Share it with a friend, write a comment. When I've been begging people to do things, it feels so shitty to have my quote unquote lifetime friends not even be able to support me in the most minimal ways. Send me a text, invite me to a holiday. And when you learn how to regulate your nervous system, those types of ideations go away. I've lost 2 former coworkers to suicide. My dad committed suicide, and the doctor, my integrated physician, who was my friend from CrossFit, where I'd scaled to 14 hours a week and I still was almost 300 pounds. She'd watched me over the course of several years, and she was like, "You're having a hormone problem." But that was about a month after, probably like 2 months after her father did commit suicide. And I've been talking about this for many years. I've been an advocate and trying to explain what this looks like to people, because most people really weren't aware of this. This wasn't something that was talked about broadly. I was told literally, we're not allowed to talk about mental health because people are scared of it. And that's why a lot of people are stuck in these cycles, because we were taught that we were to swallow our truth and we can't live in the reality of what's going on. So when you can't live in a reality of what's going on, there's no reality. There's no shared reality. Shared reality is truly like the foundation of any type of relationship, whether it's business, family, friendship, romantic, or otherwise. And if you don't have a shared reality and you don't have an ability to even understand the shared reality, then nothing is ever going to work out. And that's what's going on in my industry as well. Because when people are interviewing, I could have left to the definition of complex trauma, begging people to treat you better versus just leaving. I had one of the worst jobs I ever worked at. It was during COVID, and I should have left, but it was during COVID, and people were losing their jobs. It was literally I started it on the 16th of March of 2020, and people were losing their jobs then. And I should have left. But the thing was that at that point, I was getting feedback from Salesforce and all different big tech companies. You've had too many short stints and all these things. So I was like, I can't leave again, right? Because now I don't have options. And because then I'm gonna get this feedback when I try to interview somewhere else again. So I stayed there. And the same, because it felt safer. And the same thing happened in my marriage, right? I knew that this wasn't working for me, but it felt less safe for all these different reasons to leave than it did to stay. And that ended up putting me in a really dangerous position, the same way that my career ended up putting me in the dangerous position, and the same way that my family ended up putting me in the dangerous position. So I really want to help others get through those tough times, because no one teaches you how to human. No one says, how did we get here and how do we move forward? This is something that is a panacea, and I'm the most excited to share it. So thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and please join us at 1 p.m. Eastern for my next guest and regularly scheduled. And I will be having more of these, and there's going to be a lot more to share. Also, just want to, since it's about, there it is. Since it's about noon, recess is actually my drink of choice these days. I've been sober for over 2 years. I've been plant sober, I should say. I've been vacillating with sobriety for many, many years prior to that, because the thing about drinking and addictions and self-abandonment is that it's pervasive across everywhere. Things that look healthy are not. Like, my whole thing today is, how long can you stay in one place? If you can't stay in one place for a prolonged period of time, if you keep traveling to different places, or you're opening up, different businesses, or you're buying new houses, or you're doing all these different things to not stay present in your life and in your body, to me, that's not a sign of integration. So when you look at people who are trying to talk to you about healing, because everybody says they're doing things, right? And AI makes it so easy for anyone to just fake a resume. Oh, put this in here. This is what I did. And what I'm telling you is, use a little bit of discernment when people are talking to you about healing or anything else, right? What is their background? What are they doing to make sure that they're finding healing themselves? Because when they're running away from themselves, they're not in a place that you should be listening to them from. So I had to learn the really hard way. I used to run away from myself. I was on a plane 3 weeks a month, 5 flights a week, by my own design. I wanted to get the F out of my house because I didn't know how to solve this problem. And actually, nobody else knew how to solve this problem, because my ex-in-laws would rather come after me legally, claiming they have no obligation towards me or their son. And my ex-husband refuses to get a job. He's never been on an interview in 20 years. And I've had like 14 new jobs. And I started a business while I was so unwell. And they lied to me. And it was this whole corroborated scheme over the course of decades. And that's what complex trauma is. It's unresolved issues that lives in your body. And then when you don't fix it, all of these things happen. And just because you've never been to a therapist and you've never been formally diagnosed, it doesn't mean that you're not unwell. And it doesn't mean that you don't have things that you need to work on. That's what when I talk about, it runs in the family and it's genetic, they could be genetic, right? Like my ex-husband's father, his brother was schizophrenic and homeless by choice. And my ex-husband's father, he's not diagnosed, but he stole from his son and his orphaned wife for the last 20 years, and then claims he has no obligation to do anything about it and would rather come after me legally than actually fix any problems. So when you think about complex trauma, these are the things that happen in families over generations, when nobody heals themselves. And I got to a point where I now have nobody in my life. I had to distance myself from every single person I've ever loved. And I've still been able to find self-love and healing and a way to move forward. And I want other people to do that too, because this is the most extreme and the hardest path that I've known anybody to have. And I don't feel bad for myself, but I do need help. So if you could just throw a like, comment, share, go on my website, buy some merch with a perp. That's merch with a purpose. Healing-centered anxiety relief tools and products, with a portion of the proceeds funding the Why Go Foundation, pediatric complex trauma nonprofit, and all the slogans you'll hear all the slogans behind all the stories behind the slogans. This one is "Don't quit your dissociation daydreams." And if you want to learn about dissociation or anything else, go to whygoproject.com, dysfunction junction dictionary. We're going to be going into all those terms, because just like emerging technology, educating about trauma and holistic view of wellness and redefining the human experience through the lens of trauma is an educational process. And it's really the art and science of connection. And most people on LinkedIn are educating people in some sort, right? Or just anywhere. And this is truly the thing that we need to learn. So I hope you join us again. Thank you so much. And how are you feeling?